Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Age of AI, our series covering the rapid evolution of the AI landscape and exploring what's now and what's next and how that impacts the world of business, the workplace, individuals, and the world. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer&Co. And today we are talking about voice AI, and we're exploring how to think about using voice AI to transition your contact center into a command center, and a command center that can play an outsized role in business performance. I saw some recent study data indicating that about 89.7% of contact center agents say that they've experienced an increase in abuse and hostility when talking to customers in the past 12 months, which really isn't surprising, all things considered. However, I'm a believer that the right AI-powered contact center technology can play an outsized role in delivering better outcomes for customers and for agents. So let's dive in. My guest today is Nikola Mrkšić, the co-founder and CEO of PolyAI, a supplier of conversational AI for automated customer service. Before starting PolyAI, Nikola worked with the Apple Siri team at Cambridge, and he was the first engineer at VocalIQ, a dialogue systems startup acquired by Apple. Nikola, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be.
I'm so glad to have you. And I have to say that I tried my best on your surname, but I think that you said it all. Some names are not meant to be pronounced by native English speakers.
Yeah, Slavic languages are tough. You know, someone decided that you just need maybe a third of the vowels you have. And
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. And I would love it if you have such an interesting career background. So I'd love it if you just share a little bit about your career journey and your time at Cambridge and tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, been interested in maths and programming, coding all my life. At the end of my undergrad, I joined a company called VocalIQ as their first engineer. And one of the co-founders was a legendary professor called Steve Young. Steve, this was his third startup. He has 40,000 citations in kind of like speech recognition and dialogue system design. And he was the pro vice chancellor of Cambridge at the time. So I was in awe of the guy, and he convinced me to join his company. And I ended up doing a PhD with him while that company was happening. And then, as the company got acquired by Apple, I ended up kind of like working for Apple while finishing my PhD, which was a pretty sweet deal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. And, kind of like through that, I started working, on dialogue systems, and deep learning was just taking off. So we were really lucky, me and my co-founders, who were my colleagues at the research group at Cambridge, where we basically were there as the technology was starting to be implemented in these kind of like machine learning based systems. And you just felt like you got superpowers, right? Where, you went from like petrol to electric to nuclear, right? Where all these systems started, learning things that you would previously have to like build very kind of like pedantically arranged software for. It just started learning from data. And at that point, you were able to build things in English, throw in a speck of data, and they start speaking Italian, right? And through all those things, we felt like we were really kind of like inventing the future. And
yeah,
I think in stark contrast with that is the existing speech technology. And much to this day, the majority of rolled out speech technology that companies use to speak to their clients, they're not very good, right? It's not the best part of the day when you speak to automated service. And then you get abusive to humans, like you mentioned. So customer service is hard. It's hard with humans. It's hard with technology. It's hard all around because, companies have to deal with a lot of customers, and products are increasingly complex, and we need help.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So that kind of is a perfect segue to, where I wanted to go next, which is really about contact center and industry trends. And, customers, you said it, are not easy. Customer demands and preferences are always shifting. And, we have a generation of customers today who they don't want to talk to anybody. They want to be able to solve things themselves, and they want to be able to do things quickly. And I'm saying they, but the reality of it is we. I mean, I'm that customer. I want to be able to solve my problems quickly and efficiently. I have high expectations. And somebody like me, somebody like you, even, the more you know about technology, I think the higher your expectations are, right? Because there's a better way sometimes. So what are you seeing your customers most focused on these days?
So yeah, I think there are a few things in there, right? There was a wave of customer service automation that tried to push everyone into chat.
Yeah.
Why? Because it was cheaper. It was like one human could deal with 10 humans in parallel. Let's say synchronous, you can wait a little bit, right?
Sure.
Or you don't even know if it's automated or if it's not automated, right? It turned out that, and you're very right with what you're saying, most people don't want to call. And why do they not want to call? When you ask them, like, do you want to call? They go, no. Why? Because I don't want to have a problem to begin with. I would like to not have to call customer support about,
Yeah.
internet
Anything.
not working or a package not being delivered, right? So at that point, when you're calling, you're already, in the red. Like you're
You're already not having your best day.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, like people don't want to call, sure, but actually when they're in like trouble and when they have a problem, by far the first reaction is to call, not to explore where there's a chatbot so I can avoid calling. Like, you're already like spilled the milk, right? It's like you have to call. There's a problem. You have to deal with it. If you don't have to deal with it, you might avoid doing it altogether, right? But then if you have to get in touch with people, well, with a company, for the most part, you call across all generations.
Sure.
Now, what's really interesting is, and we recently did this research piece where we surveyed a lot of people of different generations, like what their preferred dominant channel is. You
Right.
see it swing back to the phone for Gen Z. Now, that's not something that most people expect. They think it's just like decaying with every generation. The truth is, Gen X, millennials, the generation that grew up with like a computer keyboard at their
Yeah.
fingertips,
Want to type.
the main form factor of technology, right? Like they're used to it. They're very good with it. You go lower down, and kids are using like TikTok and smartphones as
Yeah.
like the main way of interacting with technology. Hence, voice, and you see it in the uptick of like voice memos and kind of like asynchronous voice in human to
Right.
human communication, right? And there's always a lot of like very interesting stuff where people go like, oh, young people don't want to call their parents. Well, that was true 20 years ago as well, right? So I think there's a lot confused because like when you look at the younger generation gaming through the night, like the incidence of being on like constant voice comms with their friends while doing it is near
Yes.
100% these days. I was once a high schooler playing computer games, through the night, and we did less of that. I remember the moment where we started using TeamSpeak
Yeah.
eventually, those things, and it was a bit like awkward. It was like you're asking people to do it. You're like, "What do you want, dude? Like, what's happening here? Am I like, who is this person online that wants to talk to me?"
Right.
Right?
Right.
Today it is run rate. Like, games come with like that thing natively built into them. So there's more synchronous voice communication expected from the younger generation than from an older one. And I think for enterprises, we see a moment where they've just realized that they're going to have to deal with that channel. They've tried pushing everyone online. COVID happened, and voice just continued to grow and grow, and they gave up.
Right.
Now, I think solving problems at the root, right, the discipline of CX and CX journey mapping is always important. And what we see is the bigger the enterprise, the more work they've done to really just remove problems at root. So if I'm speaking to a large bank or a telco, like I know that I'm going to see a 5 to 10% contact decrease in voice, in text. And then some might have like done heavy channel guidance where they'll really
Right.
push people into chat. You might see like a move from that. But if you decouple those factors, they look at like run rate. A lot of companies are really just trying to remove the root source of a customer service call. Now that's
Mhm.
happening. Companies should do it because we shouldn't spend time dealing with these issues. They should not exist. We should have better service. But when we do, I think that channel split, enterprises have realized that voice is king, that it is dominant, that it will continue to be dominant. And now and this has been really beneficial to us, but they look at vendors with a voice first lens and say, if you can do voice, we can probably do chat easily. Whereas like,
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I
If you've
mean,
mastered this, it's a given that you can do these other things, right?
yeah. Whereas there's
Yeah.
been quite a lot of like, let's play it safe. And this age of AI where, CIOs and boardrooms and investors are telling companies, hey, why are you not using AI? As if it's simple, as if everyone has already used AI to achieve all these things that we would like to achieve. The
Right.
world's a competitive place. Capitalism drives us all. So everyone wants to build a better company before their competitor does. The truth is, today we see more companies wasting time with assistive tools, like dipping their toes into AI. Let's see if we can make the agent a bit better. It turns out that that's often a harder challenge from a user experience and design perspective than it is to build an agent that does half of your kind of like support autonomously. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of push, especially by cloud vendors, for companies to just do a little bit, to put a bit of AI in and to tick the box, but to make sure that they buy that little that they're going to buy from them, right? And that's the conundrum that the modern CIO is in.
Right. Well, I will say this. I have a number of clients who are working in the voice AI space. And the thing that is always so impressive to me is that when you can have these interactions with voice AI and it feels human, it feels real, it feels like these voice agents understand you. And, especially in instances where a customer maybe shifts gears in the middle of a conversation, or it's really, really interesting
Mhm.
how quickly the technology has
Yep.
developed at a high end. And I think that that's something that I think that generally people don't know as much about as they might, as they might need to. But there are really some interesting things happening in this space, and the more real we can make those interactions, the more pleasing it is for customers.
Yeah, agree completely. I think that we've long waged wars internally around like should it be a bit robotic to like let the people know it's automated.
Yeah,
I've always firmly believed that it should be like as human as possible because
absolutely.
the moment you hear something that's a bit out of place in whatever way, like you're poised to speak to it differently. You turn into that Alexa command mode, like three
Yeah,
tomorrow. And funnily, for technology, it actually works a lot better if someone with my non-native English accent starts speaking fast, slurring their words. It's a lot
yeah,
better if I string up a whole sentence and I say, "Hey, I want to book for 3 people tomorrow night." Like that's a lot better than 3 people tomorrow because that three might
right,
be three or
right.
God knows what, right? So like when the language model gets to kick in, the speech recognition performance improves a whole
Yeah,
lot. So you want to get people to speak. It's a paradox, but you want them to speak in an as humanly as possible to technology in order to get the best performance out of it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk now, Nicola, about, when I introduced the show, I cited that study that said that 89.7% of contact center agents report that they're experiencing an increase in abuse and hostility from customers. Why do you think that's happening?
I think we may just be logging it right now. I think it's always been a really hard job, right?
Yeah,
And I think, those agents are often not put in a place to succeed.
yeah,
The attrition is higher than ever. So people are in the job for a few months, and
yeah,
someone calls in and thinks that if they're more aggravated and they threaten to, I don't know, unsubscribe from a phone plan or something like that, they assume that they're going to get a better outcome, right? So they layer on and they abuse that person and they push. And I've spent a lot of time in contact centers where I just sit with an agent and I hear what they're going through and I go, like,
yeah,
oh my God, right? How,
yeah,
like, what kind of people do we live amongst? And then you listen to like 100 calls and you realize that it's like a lot of calls are like that. And many people are
yeah,
lovely, but many are not, right? So at that point, you kind of have to like, and I always take great care to repeat this. It's like when you're speaking to that human being or an AI, but an AI, okay, like at the moment, it's not really going to get hurt. You just
right,
the same way, at least, right? Until we get to a higher form of AI. But when it comes to these humans, like you're speaking to someone who's there, dropped in, and trying to help you
right,
do the best job possible to help you. Like they didn't mess up your internet, they didn't misdeliver something. They might
right.
be new on the job, they might not be trained well enough. And because like the contact center is so badly beaten and people offshore and then like new agents keep coming in, maybe
Sure.
they're like, dealing with a very new unfamiliar use case, the service drops and people get more frustrated, and then they get even more abusive, right? So I think you just need to automate as much as possible so that when they reach a human, people feel a bit more of an appreciation, right? And also equally, the person they reach should be like a highly paid knowledge worker who says, okay, like, I believe that because you reached me, there's a special problem that I can help you with.
Right.
Let's
Right.
figure it out, right? And I think, I'm not sure that like we reduce the incidence of abuse, but we know that the agent satisfaction is improved when you automate the grunt of the use cases, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do, then they're working on the more interesting ones. And even if there are some people who are going to be, badly behaved, there are a lot of people who then appreciate the help and, getting to resolution of a very complex problem. So the
Yeah.
gratification of those things just makes the agent, feel respected and valued. So
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. So it's not really something that has happened in the last year. The reality of this is that, human beings are reaching out to contact centers when they are not having their best days. Nobody ever wakes up in the morning thinking, I can't wait to call customer service,
yeah,
and I think that, but you know what? We're also living through stressful times in the last year or so. There are
well,
wars
over year,
happening and all different things. So
every
yeah,
year. Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes sense. Okay, so let's talk PolyAI. You co-founded that company in 2017, spinning out of Cambridge and taking what you've called bleeding edge virtual assistant tech into a customer facing product. Walk me a little bit through that journey. I think you touched on it a little bit in the beginning part of our conversation, but talk to me about how we got to this customer facing
Yeah,
product.
yeah, absolutely. So one thing that got to me when Apple acquired our previous company was people don't love Siri, right? And I tell them I work on Siri, and they would just like be like, "Oh, Siri is terrible. It doesn't work, etc., right?" I'd be like, "Okay, why?" Right? And to that, you'd get the most nonsensical answers, right? It was like, "Oh, an AI as a voice assistant should help me plan my holiday and do all these things in a magnificent way," and like. I'm not sure a human could help you with that. Like
Right.
it's a one day maybe we'll have technology and we'll know how to do the stuff that
Right.
we're coming up
Well,
with.
and Siri isn't generative AI
It-
either.
no matter. Like
Yeah.
agreed. And like you have a huge leap with like say in the consumer kind of like assistant facing form with ChatGPT. And a lot of people use and pay for ChatGPT. Very few people use the voice mode. Because again, like what do you really need that for? Right.
Right.
Unless it's like an accessibility scenario or you're driving and you have a command, which actually works really well with Siri. And I think one of the most heartwarming things for me was, the entirety of, I don't know, Apple or Siri, like would get an email when Siri like saved someone's life because they fell off a
Oh,
road,
wow.
woke up somewhere, maybe stuck. And it's like, hey, call like this ambulance, and their life would be saved. I think that's awesome, right? That
Yeah.
worked back then. It works today even better, right? And all the practical things that you need to do, like send someone an invite or this or that, mostly work, right? Sometimes they malfunction, but they mostly work. And maybe you'd use it far more if it worked 100% of the time, but it's unclear, right? So to me, the question was, where do we use this newly harnessed powers that we have with deep learning, right? And the obvious answer was the contact center, right? So I think since then, COVID hit, everything hit, this whole wave of chatbots washed away and got nowhere, right? And voice is still king, people are still calling, and offshoring goes back and forth, and it will forever be so, right? Offshore, onshore, like whatever companies try to manage their costs. But like to do it with people is getting harder and harder because our demographic pyramid doesn't look right. People change jobs. A lot of people don't want to do those jobs, and rightly so. We talked about abuse.
Right.
So you're like, what are we going to do? We're going to have to build this technology up,
Yeah.
right? And with generative AI, with all these capabilities, and with a lot of other things that have to do with like how you do speech recognition, how you build the whole thing, put it together, how you create the life experience, both with high quality voice, but also like things like tone changes. And then, how do you deliver it, package it up to an enterprise where it's not just cool when you try it out once, but actually drives both adoption and customer satisfaction so that those people that have been automated report satisfaction comparable to that they would have with a
Right.
human, right?
Yeah.
If you do that, then you've cut cost and you didn't like further aggravate the customer base. And that's the real goal. Because the previous wave of this technology, companies like Nuance and a few others that built the first generation of this technology, they achieved the whole, like, you've got 15,000 agents. We're going to build like an IVR that deals with a lot, and you're going to make people go through it come hell or high water, and you're going to have 11,000 agents instead of 15,000 agents. Like, that worked. It was very clunky and expensive to build, to maintain, to run, but it was a managed service that had positive ROI for the largest of companies, right? If you were a super
Right.
large telco or a bank and you were willing to drop CSAT by a few points, you'd implement that, right? Now, I think with greater power comes greater responsibility, and that is like, let's improve CSAT scores while saving companies money, right?
Right.
And the wonderful thing there is that it's a trade-off, right? So you can save them quite a bit of money while keeping CSAT high, or even improving it, depending on where we start.
Right.
Or you can, massively reduce costs while lowering CSAT, right? Now, what we've seen as an interesting thing is our buyers, because we're kind of like positioned as a premium product, we're expensive, we're more expensive than all of our competition, and probably so, because our stuff works. And we go like, look, we'll keep, if you have a good contact center, like, we'll be lucky to keep your CSAT where it is, but we might be able to save you a truckload of money, right? And we won't really impact that CSAT much. If you're struggling, if you're leaving people waiting and stuff, we'll make sure you leave no one waiting, right? We'll improve your CSAT scores, your NPS scores. We'll probably recuperate a lot of the revenue generating calls that are now lost in the sea of, support calls. We do like 40% of the calls we take are to do with like revenue generating activities, right?
Okay.
And a lot of those calls we automate fully, and like, you can automate them or not automate them. That doesn't matter, right? As long as, like, you make sure that you get to every call fast enough, and that's a really big business benefit for those end customers.
So you're expensive but worth it.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. So let's talk, Nikola, about this AI protection. What is it? Why it's so important today, and what distinguishes your approach from others in the space?
So when you say AI protection, what do you mean?
Well, that's one of the parts of the value prop of PolyAI is AI protection for your contact center agents.
Right. So I think that there's like an element that we talked about here, which is just making sure that your agents don't quit because they had to explain to someone for the 87th time today how to set up Apple Pay, which, believe it or not, is like 1 out of 10 calls to a lot of banks, right?
Okay.
So protection from abuse sometimes, protection from boredom in other cases, to make sure that they have an interesting job, right? So one level is like just that physical thing. And, if someone's like very abusive and stuff, hey, put them at the end of the queue, do whatever, right? Like, that at the end of the day is a design decision that we help our customers navigate in order to map out the best possible customer journey. I think then there's a whole level of protection, how you build a system so that this technology delivers the benefits without exposing the enterprise to the risk of hallucination and stuff like that, where
Okay.
you really have to make sure that even though it is a powerful model, it's not something that someone can prompt inject and then have it spew out nonsense, or even worse, offensive things, abusive things. And that whole piece is really like part of just like enterprise readiness as a pillar, right? And we do a lot of work to both like tune our own models at the LLM level, at the speech recognition layer, and at the text to speech level. So this is a very complex machine learning pipeline. There's a lot that goes into building a voice agent, right?
You keep setting the stage for me perfectly, Nikola, because that was what I wanted to talk about next. I wanted to get nerdy and talk a little bit about the technical architecture that you've built that enables this all to work.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have been building technology for this for it's all I've ever done in my life, right? So my co-founders are like senior researchers, a lot of people, right? We were working on it long before it was cool. Now it seems like one of the coolest things ever, right? And I think it's allowed us to kind of like just build technology that's really good at some stuff that is mundane but essential, that everyone just takes for granted, and they still don't work. So when you call customer service, Shelly Kramer, you're probably having an okay day. If your name is Nikola Mrkšić, God help you, right? Like, the system will not work, right? But the moment that you or I start saying dates, God forbid, like VIN numbers, zip codes, British postcodes that have both characters and letters, you don't expect it to work. You're saying it, and at that point, half the people are already opting out and screaming like, Asian, you're human, right? So like, just building models that are really good at phone-based understanding, that's a separate discipline, right? Because I don't think Novak Djokovic can outrun, the best sprinter in the world, but he's pretty good at sprinting. But he's very good at stopping in time and maybe sliding on the clay court a bit and hitting that return, right? Similarly, like for a voice agent, it's not transcription accuracy. A lot of people are fixated on that, and they go like, our model has human level performance. Well, the devil's in the detail, right? Like most of those models that are advertised as such by cloud vendors and other companies, they have human level performance with native speakers in a studio reading a mundane text from New York Times. And when a Serbian guy
Valid point there.
calls on the phone in a car with the baby screaming in the back, and he's
Yeah.
trying to tell his last name is Mrkšić, success rates are like 0 still. Like even
Right.
for us, they're not extremely good in the most extreme of settings, right? And a lot of customer service is, like stuff like that, where it just won't work and people don't expect it to work. So the cold start problem there is, how do you build something good enough for them to give it another shot, right? And I think there's a lot of just like wishful thinking in the tech community where it's like, hey, there's a new model. Like the average Joe does not follow Sam Altman's releases, and they don't know what came out and they don't believe it's changed. And most people don't use ChatGPT, and
Right.
most people don't even know why it's special. They just go like, oh, AI, yeah. Like it's
Yeah.
going to come in and kill us all, right? And at that point, you're like, okay, well, they're not going to give it another shot, even if the enterprise itself might have put a lot of money with a vendor
Right.
like us into creating something new. So you really need to just build a thing that kind of like wins back that trust, right? So for us, there's a lot of modeling and technology that allows us to have the best speech understanding on the phone, the best LLM for creating a really smooth conversation. Because if you ask me about something, and people now talk about being able to recognize that something's written by ChatGPT, it's usually overly verbose, and it's not how humans speak. Like you need to be able to be very precise, and
Right.
like, you have a very human response. So to do that, an LLM can absolutely do that too. But you got to create the LLM that's made for generating stuff on the phone, right? And then you put it all together end to end. You create one model that kind of like streams audio in and streams audio out. That is like the dream outcome. We have research teams working on that. We have prototypes that work. And then we have kind of like systems that are like architectural variations just behind that to allow the enterprise enough control while reaping the benefits of most of those advances, right? So for most of the enterprises, they neither care nor have the resources required to work on this in depth, right? Because a lot of this is still very much on the kind of like bleeding research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then you have a lot of confusion because the wrapper companies take whatever OpenAI chugs out and they try to skip that whole layer between like infra and application, that is like the platform bit that
Right.
kind of solves problems that arise from like the problem specific nature of what you're doing, right? Because most people talk about hallucinations and prompt injection. Like when it's on the phone, it's not actually really prompt injection. It's that I said, hey, I lost my card, and the system hears car, and then all of a sudden maybe JP Morgan Chase is going like, hey Shelly, I'm really sad to hear you lost your car. Do you maybe know where you parked? Now you're calling because you lost your card. And at that point you're like, you're done. You're done with voice agents for a while because you're
Right.
like, oh, this stupid thing, right? And you opt out, right? So I think there it's really important that you kind of go like thinking, okay, Shelly lost her car. Done. But I work for JP Morgan and Shelly called me. Hence, what could she have said? Well, maybe she said card because that's a banking term.
Right.
And then if you're not sure, if you look at it and you look at those probabilities and things that the model spat out, you go like, which one did you lose? And you go like, oh yeah, my credit card. Okay, it was a card. Great.
Yeah.
Now, if you tell me you lost your like Porsche versus your Lexus, then I'm a bit perplexed because I'm like, hey, like,
Why are you calling me?
yeah, well, I can't really help you with that, right? But at that point, I know. So you can kind of keep the conversation going. And that's much of what a human would do, right?
Mhm.
When we don't understand each other in conversation, like, there are very few people bold enough to say, hey, Nikola, please stop talking and start enunciating. I can't understand your Serbian accent. And I would probably find that to be quite a moral affront. I'd be like, hey, like, please, I can only take so much emotional abuse in a day, right? So we don't. We tend to adapt, we listen, And
Yeah.
then, whatever word I said, when you hear it the fifth time, you use context to disambiguate. And you go, that's what he means. God, he can't say that. Oh, God, okay, well, okay. Let's keep following the conversation, right? Our systems work in the same way, and they were built to do that because that's what you need to do to facilitate human-computer interaction.
Right. So, Nikola, I think that you have some news that's kind of exciting this week. You want to share a little bit about that with us?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we have a general campaign running that is there to showcase our platform to end users, Agent Studio, right? So we were one of the first companies, probably the first, to launch very complex enterprise use cases with large regulated industries like utilities. I think we had a voice agent running with PG&E, one of the largest utility companies
Right.
in America. We had that running in February last year, right? So this platform is the backbone of a lot of our voice deployments, and it really allows people to do a lot of things that are like specific to voice, right? It allows them to control the tone. It allows them to change voices, to implement a fleet of voices so that when you call an automated solution, it's not always the same robotic voice. It's many
Right.
different ones, right? It allows you to control exactly how responsive the system is, how fast it responds. Because I think a lot of people out there today talk about latency. And that's kind of like talking about the 0 to 60 in a car, right?
Right.
It matters, right? Like to a lot of people. But there's a reason that, like, I don't know, Porsche is still like a lot more venerated as a car than a Tesla, even though a Tesla is faster, right? Because it has other attributes that people appreciate when driving, right? Similarly, you often design a thing to not interrupt people, right? Because people speak in different ways when they
Right.
speak on automated things. So you kind of have to like have a, if I ask you a yes or no question and you go like, yeah, and you seem like you're about to say something, I'm gonna go like, well, great. In that case, we have this, right? Whereas like if I ask you an open-ended question, you go, well, I shouldn't go like, sorry, I didn't get that. Can you say it again? Because if I start doing that, you're going to opt out of the conversation, right? So
Right.
things like control of like responsiveness, voice, things like tuning the LLM itself, tweaking the output, the tone, the exact way that certain things are said, the way that certain phrases are said, right? Because when you speak to an automated thing or hear an automated generated thing, it's like, we are approaching Waterloo Station, right? And you go like, oof, right? Like, so, you can kind of like generate things or like change things. So there's a lot of control that our platform allows for building these complex use cases, and also like templatized approaches within it, which are there to kind of like allow you to create an enterprise workflow where you compartmentalize the integration complexity into kind of like a Python-esque IDE, while kind of like on the front end, you still have the main benefit of generative AI, which is like there's kind of like a workflow that's mostly based on language, right?
Okay.
And then you can kind of like look, and for most of the people, we like to refer to kind of like the transformation of the contact center into a command center, right? And that really means that it stops being perceived as this endless pit of money where you throw money and they don't even pick up the phone fast enough, right? Which is how a lot of executives who are not COO and CXO might look at the contact center. And that's very wrong, because that's not what it is. When they start not picking the calls up fast enough, it's usually because some operational upstream issue caused the number of calls to skyrocket, right? So what we love creating is an ability to just surface insights immediately and say, hey, we're getting 5 times as many calls in Oakland about price, like people being overcharged, or we're getting a bizarrely high number of questions about this kind of cruise here. And then you go like, oh, the website's down in that particular part, right? You go and you fix it, right? So that piece is a big part of what we call the manager app inside the Agent Studio, which is basically like you have this fleet of agents working on your behalf, this AI hive mind. And it has wonderful things like, A/B testing for half of the agents to try renewing you if you try to churn as a customer. What if I
Right.
give you 3 months off versus what if I give you a 50% discount, but I lock you in for a year? And you go like, I wonder what people say yes more to.
Yeah, that A/B testing is very cool.
It is, right? And it's like something that is really hard to do with a human population, because
Right.
you got to stand everyone up and be like, if your name ends with anything from A to M, please do this. And if it's,
Yeah.
um, latter part of the alphabet, like do the other thing, that's really hard to enforce, monitor, to even roll out so people hear it. And then, they get a call, they need to do it. It's like, do they really have time to think about it? It's hard, right?
Hmm.
These are the kinds of things that make the whole command center superhuman, right? Now you can do these kinds of things. And instead of explaining how to set up Apple Pay to people, one of your agents is now sitting there and like observing AI conversations, figuring out what works well, what works better, what doesn't work, right? And going back and feeding into your product, because
Yeah.
people don't think about it, but the contact center is a part of your product, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Product.
And
And
it's really the front line, I mean, front line, having contact with customers on a daily basis, using that data to be able to inform product and R&D and all of that sort of thing. I mean, it's the perfect focus group, right? So
that's
I love that.
so
This
much.
has been great. I love that, the evolution of call center. I actually typically tend to call it contact center, the evolution of contact center to command center. So that's where we're going.
Yeah. Contact
I
center.
like it. I like it. Well, this
Yeah.
has been awesome. So, PolyAI co-founder and CEO Nikola Mrkšić. Say it for me. Nikola, say your last name.
Nikola Mrkšić and Shelly
Mrkšić.
having me. It
I've
was a
got it.
great
Hold
conversation.
on. Mrkšić.
That's great. That's phenomenal.
All right. All right.
To you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today for our conversation on our Age of AI series. And I am, PolyAI is officially on my radar screen, and I look forward to watching your new product news out later this week, and to seeing PolyAI continue to make inroads in the voice AI market. You're doing some awesome stuff, and I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. So, to our viewers and listeners, as always, thanks for hanging out with us today. If you've not yet hit that subscribe button, let's fix that now. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, and we'll see you next time for more exploration of the age of AI.